Excuse me, sir, do you have any Grey Poupon? But of course, you handsome devil, you. Here you go. You imbecile!
As I mentioned in a video a few weeks ago, I recently traded off my steaming pile of German automotive excellence to some guy out in California. Now, don't feel too bad for him, though, because he traded me this steaming pile of British automotive excellence. And clearly, now that the car's here, I can tell he got the better end of this deal by a lot. Basically, we were both apes, and we were throwing stuff at each other and covered each other in our own filth. That's exactly what we did, but at least now I have a beautiful Bentley Turbo R leaking all over my garage. I should have known doing this straight trade was a big mistake, but it all kind of happened very quickly and by accident. I was really disgusted with my E63 wagon. It was a beautiful car. It was green. It was a wagon. It had 500 horsepower, but it was braking constantly. It's left me stranded multiple times, and I was just really disgusted with it. I also had invested heavily into it. I bought it for $13,000 and it kept breaking, and I spent another $4,000 on it in the few months that I owned it. And I figured, especially since I was making videos about it breaking all the time, that I was ruining my chances of ever selling it on. So I guess I was just going to keep it forever and keep fixing it forever, or at least until something catastrophic broke and then I could finally junk it. But as fate would have it, it didn't really work out that way. I was on Facebook and I saw a post in the Radwood group, a guy advertising this Bentley wanting to trade it for something else, something more practical, but just something, and nobody dared offer any kind of trade except yours truly here, but I really wasn't serious. I was going for a joke as I posted a picture of my E63 getting loaded onto a flatbed trailer. It was a joke. I never expected him to actually want to trade his 1990 Bentley Turbo R for my E63 wagon, but he replied almost immediately saying, yes, I do that deal. And then we messaged each other a little bit and then spoke on the phone, and the deal was done. And before I knew it, a truck was taking my E63 off to California. And eventually, after dodging some wildfires, that's why there's some soot on top of this thing, he brought back the Bentley Turbo R. And at first sight, I thought, oh no. Oh dear. Now, the guy I was trading with, we both did our best to tell each other everything that we knew was wrong with our cars. With my E63, it was a little easier because I had a mechanic go through and inspect everything, and there were a lot of issues, some of which I hadn't sorted out yet, but it was still a nice driving car. With this one, he just listed everything that he knew, but since it's an old Bentley, there was a lot of stuff that he didn't know about, or he admitted, or he just plain forgot. He told me about the windows being kind of weak, the motor regulators maybe thumping a little bit, but they arrived taped up. They were taped because he was worried about them falling down during transport. The cosmetic condition is a little bit less than what I hoped it to be. It's had a repaint that wasn't the greatest, but still, it's a presentable car. But the big scary thing are the leaks. It's leaking badly from the power steering, along with this complicated hydraulic system that runs off mineral oil that all Rolls-Royce and Bentley cars had from the 70s until the mid-90s, and it controls the brakes and the hydraulic suspension. That's the scary one. If I knew it was leaking big puddles, as I discovered when it sat in the garage for the first night, I probably wouldn't have done this deal. But now that it's here, I just have to deal with it. In addition, there's plenty of other little things that need to be taken care of, typical with an old car, but at least it runs and drives well enough. It sputters a little bit at idle, but it does run and drive really well, which is a huge improvement over the last Bentley that I purchased. At this point, I imagine a few of you are feeling sorry for me, or you think I'm a moron, or both, but don't feel sorry for me, because now that I've had this car for a few days and gotten to drive it around a little bit, I'm convinced this is the best luxury car value in the world, bar none. And if you consider how much I invested in the E63, I was about $17,000 into it. Trading for this Bentley Turbo R technically makes it the cheapest Bentley Turbo R in the country. Now my E63 probably was worth more close to what I originally paid for it, the $13,000. So then that really makes it the cheapest running and driving Bentley Turbo R in the country, at least that I can find. So it's not all that bad, and when I give you a tour of this Bentley Turbo R and its numerous, yes, quirks and features, but a lot of cool luxury features, you'll see why I'm so attracted to this thing. I've always wanted one, and now that I have it, it's living up to my expectations. Now, I'll admit at first glance, this Bentley Turbo R may not look like much, but like Han Solo said about his Millennium Falcon, it's got it where it counts. Now, more on that in a little bit, but when you look at this thing, it really doesn't look like much. It looks like a typical Bentley or Rolls-Royce product of the 80s and 90s. Performance figures were called adequate because they didn't want to tell you how laughably bad those performance numbers were. It was less than 200 horsepower out of giant V8s, and acceleration was on the wrong side of 10 seconds. But the Bentley Turbo R single-handedly changed all that, bringing these brands really into the modern era. And they did that with a big Garrett turbo, which we will pop right here. Yes. 6.75 liters of mechanical excellence and some Bosch mechanical fuel injection brought up the horsepower to, well, they didn't officially advertise the horsepower, but it was much higher. People rated it around 300 horsepower, which is pretty good. But it's the torque that's really impressive. It was somewhere around 470 pound-feet of torque. That enabled this giant land yacht to accelerate to 60 at somewhere around 7 seconds, or a little less than 7 seconds, which was really impressive for the time. But they didn't just help the performance numbers a lot in the acceleration, it was also the handling. As you can see here, there's a lot of warnings for the hydraulic suspension system. It's also part of the braking system. It's all together, and that's one of the big leaks I have on this car. I don't know if you can see it down there. There's a pretty nice leak going on right underneath the fuel distributor here. When working properly, which this one is working pretty well considering it's leaking like a sieve, it makes for a very plush and comfortable ride. But it wasn't good for a performance sedan, so Bentley stiffened up the sway bars on this thing 100% to make this car actually handle in the corners. Let's get one more look at this beautiful engine, roll that beautiful bean footage. And one weird thing, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Doug DeMuro would lose his mind, but it looks like seat cushions have been attached to the hood for hood insulation. This must be factory, but why would you have tufted, stuffed hood insulation pads? There are some other weird features in this car on the inside, but mostly it's beautiful in there. So with this Bentley, you get the best of both worlds. You get classic styling in the interior especially. Look at all this wood, acres and acres of wood, metal buttons and knobs for most things, analog gauges, not a single infotainment screen in sight. Still, there are plenty of modern conveniences. I have automatic climate control here that works pretty well, even though the heater's kind of weird. It works when it wants to. Power seats that are memory and heated. Look at that vintage cell phone down there, that's super cool. The interior of this thing is just so nice. It is so plush and comfortable, but the seats being a little sporty, they do have a little bit of side bolster to grab, but they're not horrible aggressive sports seats like you find in many luxury / performance cars. And back on the classic features, my favorite classic feature being the town and country horns. That's why I have two settings here, one for the city and one for the country. Kind of a boat horn, an air horn, and for some reason they gave us 4 horn buttons on the steering wheel. Why we need 4 horn buttons, I have no idea, but this car is just way overbuilt. Look at the latch in this glove box. It looks like it's out of an 18th century antique. So pretty. Oh, that blue piping to match the blue dashboard and paint, it's just so pretty. And the back seat goes back to the sporting nature of the car. But one weird thing is, look at this. The seat belt is buckled into the seat. This is an extra buckle here so it can tuck into the seat. And when you want to use it, then you buckle it into the main seat belt there. So this thing is weird, but also really, really cool. And it kind of makes sense now why this thing cost almost $200,000 new, and adjusted for inflation from 1990 to now, well over $200,000. And I bought it for less than the cost of a used Toyota Camry. This much quality, this much opulence. It reminds me a lot of my Rolls-Royce Phantom, but for way less money. And with the radio being updated to Bluetooth, I'm even more inclined to drive this car because my Phantom, it has iDrive, BMW's iDrive system. It could never be upgraded, so I'm just stuck with this old antiquated system forever. And driving it, it feels just as special. So let's go for a cruise. Yes. So it passes the pinky test well enough, my test of a luxury car, where I can drive this thing with my pinky. I can even shift the gears with my pinky as a column-mounted shifter. I'm sitting in this quiet, insulated cabin that is just so nice. The car itself feels like a bank vault. It feels so thick and sturdy, but the ride is so nice. It's weird, really, because it has that land yacht ride where the bumps are just soaked up, but handling-wise, it's super responsive. You just don't expect it. And then the acceleration is really good as well. I just broke this thing loose. It is amazing how hard this thing accelerates and how it takes a turn. It's just so impressive that this may be the car that finally gets me out of my Rolls-Royce Phantom, which is a much more expensive car than this. I have large monthly payments on it because I took out a loan. If the Car Wizard is able to sort this thing out for a reasonable amount of money and I can start driving this thing regularly, then I can sell on the Phantom and save myself a lot of money. I'll be the first person ever to say I'm economizing by buying an old Bentley. The real question is, though, whether it'll do a burnout. My E63 AMG couldn't do it without blowing a power steering pump, a common problem with all of those cars, and my Rolls-Royce Phantom has too many computers to stop it from doing a burnout. For this Turbo R, it's got a GM transmission backing it, so maybe, come on. It's doing it! You're kidding me! A big smoky burnout! Yes! Yes!